Hey guys, Ariel over here at Finance. This is the first real meal I am making on my brand new range. So, I'm going to bring you guys along and show you what I'm doing. As I've been rattling on here, I've chopped up onions and now garlic. This is elephant garlic, so that's why the really big cloves. And I'm going to just saute those in some kind of good fat, coconut oil. Could use olive oil if you want. I used a little bit of bacon grease, butter, whatever you prefer. I use different things different times. But now that we're this far into the video, let me tell you what we're making. This is and I always genuinely forget, shepherd's pie I think is one with potatoes on top. Pot pie is one with like a biscuit on top. We're doing a shepherd's pie, I believe. In any case, we're doing whichever one has potatoes on top. So I'm just going to saute up my onions and garlic here using my favorite Cutco knife that was a gift from a great friend of quite a few years ago. I use this thing all of the time. And I'm just going to saute the onions and garlic here till they are starting to look a little translucent. Chop up the rest of this, and then I'm going to get my potatoes actually going for the mashed potato part that's going to go on top. This is a great meal to do, I think, for cold weather. It's just a nice hot kind of comfort food filling kind of recipe that I like, and I haven't made in quite a while. So, like most things, I'm not measuring anything very accurately or precisely, and it's not going to hurt anything if you don't. You can put in whatever amounts of things you like. You probably know I love onions and garlic, so there's going to be quite a bit of that in here. For starters, okay, now when you're sauteing onions and garlic, you want to use a little bit of a low heat because you're not trying to burn them. You just want to get all those delicious flavors and nutrition nice and cooked through. And I did one large onion and one full head of elephant garlic. So while my onions and garlic saute there, I am going to get my potatoes going. I'm going to go inside this. So I'm going to put a little bit of water in the bottom of my pan. Just like a ½ inch or something like that. And rinse off my potatoes here real quick. You could use any variety of potato you like, but these are just a basic white Kennebec potato, which is good for storing all winter. And gonna dice these up. Doesn't matter a whole lot, particularly how you chop them up. The smaller you chop them, the quicker they'll cook. But we're just going to make a real basic mashed potato. Keep giving these a little bit of a stir there. You can probably see they're looking pretty translucent now. Getting cooked most of the way through. And to dice up potatoes for something like this, I usually just split in half and half again and kind of make quick cubes because I'm not, like I said, real worried about exactly what this looks like or I'm being even or anything because I'm just going to cook them soft. So I'm going to start that up as well. Turn on low there till I get all these chopped up. This is a shepherd's pie or pot pie, either one, because they're basically, in my mind, pretty much the same thing, just with a different topping on each one. Are both good meals you could easily make ahead if you like. If you are a busy working person with a family and little kids and whatever, I mean, who isn't busy? This is something, if you have time the day before, you could easily make and have done and ready to put in the oven at some future time. So it's a nice one for that. And this is not an expensive recipe at all because potatoes are inexpensive. You can get onions and garlic. A couple little brown spots there in my potato. I try to grow most of my own onions and garlic, but as you probably know, the voles ate all my garlic last year, so that did come from the grocery store. I'm just going to put all these in here. I'm not covering them the whole way with water. I know that is often how people boil potatoes, but they'll actually cook soft faster if you are basically steaming them. So I've got a little bit of water in the bottom of the pan there. This is something probably most of you know, but if you're new to cooking, you might not. Steam is hotter than boiling water. So if you just put a little bit of water in the bottom of the pan, and then I'm going to cover it here in just a minute when I'm done dumping my potato chunks in, you're going to basically be steaming most of the potatoes, and so they're going to cook soft faster than if you covered them with water and boiled them. I might not quite get all of my potatoes in there. I run out of room in my pan, but that's fine. And again, I'm not measuring. I just want to make enough mashed potatoes that I can cover a nice thick layer over my 9x13 pan here. So you could do a thicker or a thinner layer. Doesn't matter at all. Use what you've got. Try new things and experiment and have fun with cooking and don't be scared of it. I think I'm going to maybe quit after this one. Say that is enough to fill my pan, fill my pot. Onions and garlic there, they're pretty good to go. I'm actually going to lid on my potatoes, and we're going to add some ground meat to our onion and garlic pan here. This is ground elk because that's what I have. But the same recipe works equally well with just about any other kind of ground meat that you prefer. I've done it most often in my life with beef, or you could use lamb or turkey or chicken or anything else like that if you want. That is 2 pounds of ground meat. Again, there's, proportions. You can do whatever you like. You can make this vegetarian if you just want to leave the meat out. You can put more meat in if you want it to be really heavy on meat. But this seems like plenty for me, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just going to mix my meat in with the onions and garlic there. At this point, I'm going to salt it a little bit. Generally, for most things, a half a teaspoon of salt per pound of meat seems to work really well. I would use some kind of unrefined salt. It's got lots of minerals your body needs and is easier to absorb and use than a processed salt. So that's my dirty Celtic gray salt, and I'm not going to measure, but got 2 pounds of meat. A half teaspoon per pound would be 1 teaspoon. I'm going to call that 1. And now that I've got meat in there, I can turn my heat up just a little bit on this. If you are using ground beef or something, you're going to probably have a little more fat in here. My elk's super lean, so I'm not going to really have any fat at all or any grease cooking out of there as it sautés. Check on our potatoes here. I can hear the water simmering under there. There you can maybe see the first curls of steam coming up. So don't really need to do anything to them till they're steamed. So I'm just going to put that lid back on there. Put away my extra potatoes that didn't fit. And so basically for the rest of this, got lots of options, like most other things I make. I'm going to put some combo of veggies with this. The particular combination I use tends to vary depending on what I've got around. I'm going to use mushrooms because I do love mushrooms. So while my meat sauteing, I'm going to slice those up here. And give this an occasional stir. Smells really good in here now. But I'm just going to slice these up just a little bit. A couple of these are starting to shrivel a tiny bit. They've been in my, that box has been in the fridge just a little long. Starting to dry out, but that doesn't hurt anything. You could use dehydrated mushrooms or something as well. And then I'm going to put in some peas. I've done, in the past, I've also done green beans, carrots, you could do bell peppers, just about any veggie combo you like. But that's what I've got around. I'm probably going to add some corn too, because I've got a friend coming over for dinner and I happen to know they really like corn. So I think this one's going to have mushrooms, peas, and corn in it for my veggies other than the onions and garlic. And again, if you're new here, guys, my main goal with doing cooking videos is just to help inspire people to try cooking their own food, get a little more involved in their own diet and nutrition, just what's going in your mouth and what's going on in your body. And I happen to love to cook. It's something I very much enjoy doing for myself and other people. And if I can inspire other people to enjoy cooking, do more of it if they already do it, try it for the first time if you've never done it, then that is a success as far as I'm concerned. And I don't usually make anything terribly fancy. I just want food to taste good and be good for you. I'm going to use a few mushrooms out of this pack and call that good enough for this. Keep those for another day. I'm getting all kinds of lovely smells coming off the stove top over here. This is, if you want to speed this up a little bit and are in a big hurry, you can always just buy some of those bags of frozen mixed veggies. They're usually pretty inexpensive, like $1 or $2 depending on the size of the bag. In a local grocery store, they've often got a mix of, peas and carrots and broccoli and whatever. There's various mixes I've seen. You could just buy a bag of those and it would be all chopped up and you wouldn't need to take the time to do any of this. On the other hand, you could grow all of your veggies from scratch in your own garden and it'll probably taste the best. But it's the middle of winter, it's snowy outside, and there's no fresh veggies coming out of my garden right at the moment. So you work with what you have. And I do try to use a lot of frozen bags of veggies in the winter for whatever I can't preserve of my own stuff. Bags like this tend to be relatively inexpensive and a pretty efficient way to get some decent quality veggies in your diet without always spending a ton of money for fresh veggies at the produce store, grocery store, wherever you go. And I do still buy some of those too, but it does, if you're trying to be budget conscious, it does help if you, with the expense side of things, if you do a little bit of bags of frozen veggies. There you can see in our potato pan here, can see they're getting a little bit clear. When I try to stick them with a fork, it goes in, but they're not super soft yet. I'm going to mix them up there just a tiny bit so that I know that they're not burning on the bottom. And I can see I do still have water in there. That is the one thing, if you're steaming them versus boiling them, you do want to make sure you don't run your pan out of water, because it will burn, and burnt potatoes smell terrible. I'm turning the heat up here on my meat a little bit. Could have probably done that earlier because it's got way more juice in there than when it was just onions and garlic. It's getting almost thoroughly browned. And I'm going to toss the mushrooms in there. Then we're going to make a little bit of just a creamy sauce to part of this because it tastes good. And I'm going to use coconut milk just because my body tends to be intolerant of dairy. Most people would use regular dairy milk or cream or something like that. You can do whatever you like. Browning meat there. See if I can pile all my mushrooms into here as well without over. Okay, so the meat's nice and done. Getting the mushroom flavors cooked in there. Grizzly's coming through the kitchen. Check out what's going on. And that part is about good to go. Let's check on our potatoes here. Imagine they are probably soft. Stab them with a fork, they break apart, but it could be just a little bit softer to be easier to mash. And let them go a couple more minutes. And I'm going to say this is good, so I'm going to turn that off. And I love my stainless steel pots and pans. I use them every day for years now. They've got we are going to end up with 2 panfuls. Got a nice, I've done a ton of reading about what was the best set of cookware to buy for the money, and this one ranked as high as many that cost thousands of dollars, with professional chefs who were reviewing it and such. It's got a copper, triple plied copper core that not only goes at the bottom of the pan, but also up the sides partway as well, so that conducts heat really nice and evenly, and then it's stainless steel inside and out, nothing non-stick, none of those chemicals to worry about, and they're just super durable. Like I said, I've been using this set daily for years, and I expect to use them for probably the rest of my life. I love them. Anyway, just even out my chunks here. Get all my onions and garlic in the one pan and the big chunks of meat and mushrooms in the other. This doesn't have to be super precise. I'll try to make up, like normal, a recipe of approximately what I did down below under the Show More tab, but it will probably, I'll do a recipe down there for just one pan, because I know certainly not everyone's going to want 2 9x13 pans. So, got my onions, garlic, and mushrooms and meat in there. I'm going to use up the rest of this bag of frozen peas. Just going to split that between the 2 pans. Not entirely successful in being even there either. There we go. Give it some pretty color. I'm actually going to reuse this pan to make our little bit of a flavorful sauce to go over that. And you could wash it in between, but there's no reason to. I'm just gonna, the flavors are going to be going back into the same dish anyway, so that's not a problem. Okay, I'm going to say those potatoes are pretty thoroughly soft. Just going to turn them off and let them sit for a minute. And so for this, you could do lots of different flavors. I'm going to turn my pan on low there. Like I said, I'm using a coconut milk. You could use any normal dairy milk that you like. Carefully put that in the pan there and let the solid cream part start to melt a little bit. And we will flavor this up. Now this is where you've got the most room for using, I'd say, lots of imagination with whatever kinds of flavors and herbs and spices and such you prefer. For me, I'm going to, let's see, what are we going to put in there? Oh, with beef or elk. That's a brand. Well, I've got an open one somewhere. For me, I'm going to do a little bit of marjoram. Just a nice healthy sprinkle in there. I've got a lot of my own herbs that I dried that I grew as well. Got some rosemary here. Gonna put a little bit of that in. What else have we got? Oregano. That sounds good. I've got a whole post about spices. Well, I've got one about our video on how I dry my own. And then I've got a whole post as well on using different spices. And if you're unfamiliar with that, some ways to help get comfortable with picking different ones that might work well for whatever particular meat or vegetable you're trying to season. And let's just do a little bit of basil. That's actually a purple basil I dried. And we'll grind a little fresh black pepper. Or I guess fresh tri-colored pepper. That would be into here. See that's starting to simmer just a little bit. Get all those seasonings soaking their flavor into there. I'll let go on the pepper. Now I'm going to put a little broth in here. You could use any kind of chicken or vegetable stock. I have and highly recommend a good bone broth. Make my own. I'll have to do a video on that someday, but it's super easy. There's tons of info out there. Just get on Google and look it up if you don't know how to make your own. But we're going to melt that in there while all our flavors are soaking into the milk. Just let that dissolve. And while it's doing that, let's make our mashed potatoes. So there's just a tiny bit of water, I'm guessing, left in the bottom of my potato pan here. Yep, so I didn't have that full, it was just kind of steaming the potatoes. And let's fix this so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to leave it in there because it's not that much. If you boiled your potatoes and had the water up over them, you'd want to drain a little bit of it off so it wasn't too watery. But I'm just going to use my potato masher here, squish these up a little bit. And while they're squishing up, let's melt a little bit of butter in there. If you can, I recommend a good grass-fed butter, like from a local dairy, or if you don't have one of those, like I don't, then Kerrygold is available in a lot of grocery stores. Good healthy fats are really, really key for your body's ability to operate your brain correctly, to be healthy, to feel full and satisfied. Stay away from all those. I'm not a doctor, but I recommend staying away from all those artificial fats, no fake butters or margarine or anything like that. And I don't mind my mashed potatoes being kind of chunky. I actually prefer them that way. So we had a little bit of water in there from potatoes cooking. We've got a little butter. I am going to, oh, we need some salt. You can use all kinds of salt. What you saw me get earlier was Celtic gray salt. This is Redmond real salt. Again, it looks dirty. It's got all the minerals in there and all those goodies. You could add more black pepper to this if you wanted. I'm not a big black pepper fan myself. I only like a little bit of the flavor. So I'm going to call that good. And if you want to make this richer, you could mix in cream, milk, cream cheese, more butter, whatever else you like. But let's see what that tastes like. I think that's pretty good. A couple bigger chunks in there still. Give that another couple mashes. And we're going to call that good. And you also probably noticed I didn't mention, I left the potato peels on. You can take them off if you don't like the look or the texture or whatever of potato peel in your mashed potatoes. But I like doing whole wheat mashed potatoes, so got it all in there. Plus it's a little quicker and then it looks real, and I think that's how all the fancy restaurants do it now, so you know that it actually came from a real potato instead of a powdered mix. So our potatoes can just sit there. We've got our milk, spice, and broth mixture cooking over here. If you planned ahead a little better than me, you would have had your broth all thawed out already if you have frozen broth. And we're going to thicken this up just a little bit. Several ways to do that. You could use flour. It's probably the most common. You could use cornstarch. Very similar texture to cornstarch. I like is arrowroot. It lets you avoid flour if you are, lets you not avoid making a mess when you're talking and not paying attention. Lets you avoid flour if you've got any issues with wheat, and for the most part I try to avoid most corn products, just not that digestible, and I have my concerns about how the corn is grown and the pesticides used and the genetic modification and all of that. So you could use whatever, but as soon as my broth is all melted here, we're going to whisk in a little bit of arrowroot powder, but you could do the exact same thing with cornstarch or flour. Actually, if you're using flour, you'd have to be a little more careful than I'm going to be if you didn't want to get this to be really lumpy. But the arrowroot, I find, just doesn't get lumpy like that very quickly. And while that finishes melting there just a little bit, I'm going to start my oven up. Always not a bad idea to check and be sure that your oven wraps are actually placed at the levels where you want them to be before you have them hot. It's a little more of a pain to move. So there we go. There, I just heard it light. It's got a little click igniter there. And with a propane oven, if I want to double check, I can actually see the glow of the blue flames under there, so I know it's lit. Gonna set that to 350. Let that start warming up. It doesn't seem to take long at all. This will be the first time I actually baked anything in it, but I did play around with it when I got it hooked up last night. So I think we're good to go here. I'm going to just shake in just a little bit, a couple tablespoons of arrowroot powder here to thicken this up. It's not a big deal. This could be thicker or thinner depending on your personal preference, what you like. Some of it's going to get simmered away as steam as this is in the oven. Some of this is going to soak into the meats and veggies that we've got in there, and some of it's just going to remain kind of a broth. And like I said, I don't really see any lumps. I don't seem to have a whole lot of problem with arrowroot powder with getting lumps, just putting it directly in like that. If you're doing flour, you're going to want to use your fat, your coconut cream, your butter, or whatever you start out with. You're going to want to put that in there first and cook it with the flour. Otherwise, you are going to get a very lumpy mix here. But you can kind of see there as I stir, that's starting to get thicker. And I don't have to cook this quite the whole way because it is going to cook a little more in the oven. But you do, if you've ever used cornstarch and stuff, you do get a little bit of a raw taste if you don't get it cooked, so you don't want to do that. Though it would probably cook sufficiently in the oven to not have that flavor left at all. There we go. It's not thick, but that's just thick enough to be a good sauce for my taste. So turn that off. All that good. And we are going to pour this. See if I can divide this a little more evenly this time over my two pans here. Go. I love these Pampered Chef spatulas to really clean everything out so you're not wasting food that you just took the time to cook or grow or buy or whatever. Try to clean the pan really good. And whip up my drip. And just kind of spread my sauce just a little bit over everything there. It would spread out. It would spread out pretty well on its own anyway. Give it a little bit of help. And now we're going to kind of dot our mashed potatoes around on top. So again, this isn't anything precise. I just try to take little spoonfuls, forkfuls, kind of top it all off like that. And again, this is a personal preference thing. You could do more or less potatoes on top. You can make a really thick fluffy layer. You can do it really thin. It's kind of up to whatever you like. I call that good. I'll swap pans here. If you don't get, I try to do little spoonfuls because if you do a big chunk and drop it on top of there, it kind of sinks into your bottom layer and then it's hard to spread around without messing up the layers. Not that that hurts anything at all about how it tastes, it just doesn't look quite the same. I'm going to finish this off here. These last few crumbs spread out across there. Use my spatula again, clean out my potato pan. In addition to not wasting the food and your money and your time and whatever that went into it, it makes it easier to do your dishes if you got most of the food out when you were doing this with a nice rubber spatula. And I'm just going to kind of smooth off the tops there just a little bit so they're not sticking up too much, getting burnt on top. So there we go. I'm going to pop these in the oven because everything's pretty much hot because I just did this. It's only going to need 15-20 minutes for just kind of simmering all the flavors together. If you covered this, put it in the fridge overnight or whatever, you would definitely need to plan probably more than an hour to warm it all through because you got a big cold block of stuff there that would have to heat up. And it's not scalding hot, but it's warm through, which is significantly different than starting with the whole thing cold. So there we go. Thanks for watching, folks. If you're interested in more info on my off-grid tiny house life, check out some of my other videos here. And if you like what you're seeing, click the little picture of my house to subscribe and then hit the little bell so YouTube actually notifies you every time there's a new video available. See y'all next time.